Let's begin with an opening statement of why voters should elect you as our next senator.
So we were looking at all the corruption that was coming out of Montgomery, and we know that that caused many Alabama citizens to kind of lose faith in the political establishment. This includes specific individuals as well as institutions. So we know if we actually want to make our world better, that we need to elect a different kind of candidate. And it would be a candidate who is anchored in honor, a candidate who is committed to doing the right thing, and I'm a different kind of candidate. I'm a different kind of candidate for three specific reasons. First, I'm a fiscally responsible Democrat who leads with faith. Second, I'm a graduate of Duke University, the Fuqua School of Business, where I earned my MBA, and I've worked in several Fortune 500 companies in order to take care of my family. And finally, I'm a graduate of the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and I am a former naval officer who had the distinct honor of leading sailors through dangerous situations at sea. And I did that in order to protect our freedom. Faith, family, and freedom represent the values that all of us learned growing up right here in Alabama. And I believe that if we govern based upon our values, we will be able to reach across party lines, collaborate with independents and moderate Republicans, and actually make our state better.
So where do you stand on the repeal or the replacement of plans for Obamacare?
So I actually always answer this question in terms of my wife. My first day at the Fuqua School of Business, I looked across a crowded room and I saw the woman who would become my future wife. She's an individual who has done everything right. She graduated from Spelman College. She earned her MBA at Duke University, the Fuqua School of Business. And after working for Procter & Gamble on the CoverGirl brand, she fulfilled her lifelong dream when she opened her own business and started running her own brand agency. And then she got dropped by her insurance. She was one of the individuals that had the honor of sitting in the Oval Office and talking to President Barack Obama about her specific experience. Whenever I talk to my Republican colleagues about this issue, I always ask the question, what is someone like my wife supposed to do in that particular situation? They never have an answer. So to go back to the question specifically, I believe that the Affordable Care Act was a very important first step. It got more individuals covered. It eliminated lifetime limits and disqualification for pre-existing conditions. But we know, while it may have decreased premiums for families in New York or Chicago or Washington, D.C., that premiums for Alabama families went up. As a person who wants to serve as a United States Senator for Alabama, there are aspects of the Affordable Care Act that need to be fixed. And my focus is to lock in the Affordable Care Act as it is today, and then focus specifically on the root causes of those premiums rising for Alabama families and fix that problem.
Okay. The intelligence community says Russia did interfere with the 2016 presidential election. They agreed on that. President Trump remains unconvinced that Russia interfered. What are your thoughts about the president's refusal to agree with our intelligence community?
I don't really spend a lot of time focusing on President Trump specifically. As a matter of fact, when anyone asks me about a comment that he's made, I always start out with bless his heart. And everybody who hears that knows exactly what I mean by that. Having said that, the intelligence community consensus is absolutely on point. We know that Russia attempted to influence the last election season. At this point in time, there is no evidence to indicate that it would have changed the outcome of the election. And so the thing that we all need to walk away with is the investigation happened the way it was supposed to. It came to the conclusions that came out, but there's nothing to suggest, at least at this point in time, that the outcome of the election would have been different.
A recent New York Times report states 65,000 people have been arrested by Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers since President Trump took office. 40% increase over the same period last year. What should we do about border security and immigration?
So I love to talk about immigration in two distinct parts. The first is legal immigration, and the second is illegal immigration. With regards to legal immigration, I had the distinct privilege of attending Duke University, the Fuqua School of Business, where 30% of our class included folks who are non-US born. And many of those individuals, upon graduation, went to work for companies that are headquartered right here in the United States. I believe that top talent is top talent, and we need to continue to recruit the best talent in the world in order to make our U.S. economy stronger. Now, with regards to illegal immigration, this actually goes back to the first statement that I made when I described the reasons why I am running for United States Senate and how it is that I am a different type of candidate. Why would anyone leave their country and run the risk to come to this country illegally? It's because they have faith. Faith that their life here in the United States will be better than wherever it is that they came to the United States from. Second, they're typically trying to earn dollars in order to send home in order to take care of their family. And then when they reach a certain savings level, they often try to bring their family to the United States so that they can experience the freedom that all of us get to experience every day. Now, we know border security is absolutely important, but some of the rhetoric, particularly rhetoric focused on the concept of building a wall, is simply a code word or a dog whistle to be able to say that people who come to the United States undocumented from the South are bad. And that's just not something that I can co-sign on. When it comes back to Alabama families specifically, we need to have a vibrant migrant worker program that allows us to recruit the employees that Alabama employees need to work on farms and work on office buildings as well. And that is something that we should be focused on, not demonizing folks who came to the United States in an undocumented fashion.
We have seen ISIS attack other countries. ISIS inspired attacks here in America. As a senator, what would you do to keep our homeland safe and secure?
Well, the first thing is it is absolutely critical that we have the most and the strongest military in the entire world. I had the distinct honor of serving as an officer in the United States Navy for over 9 years. And I am the only candidate on either the Democratic or Republican side who volunteered to come back in the service a second time after September 11th and serve again. The reason why I mentioned that in the context of this question is that we have fantastic soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen who are Alabama's sons and daughters who have volunteered to take this fight to whatever enemy exists anywhere around the world. So we need to continue to support them with leadership, equipment, education, and training to make sure that we are actually able to counter whatever threats may happen. At the end of the day, ISIS is centered around an ideology. And the more that we continue to display our freedom, we will be able to chip away at that ideology and ultimately defeat that adversary.
Okay. The economy is always one of the main issues of any campaign.
Mm-hmm.
As of right now, our economy is no better off now before or after Trump's taken office.
Right.
What needs to be done to improve the economy?
I am a fiscally responsible Democrat who leads with faith. What do I mean by being fiscally responsible? The fiscally responsible conservative would tell you that the government program should not exist. The true blue progressive Democrat would tell you that we have a moral obligation to have the government program in place and that the program should be funded at all cost. As a fiscally responsible Democrat, I believe any government program that we have should have three components. It should have a goal, it should have an evaluation time frame, and it should have a success criteria. If the goal of the program is being met, it should continue to get funding. If the goal is not being met, the program should be reassessed, and if over time the program is not getting better, then the funding should ultimately be pulled. I told you, I'm a different kind of candidate. And before we get into the specifics of what the program is going to be to improve the economy, we have to have a process and methodology to make sure that any option that we choose can be evaluated to determine whether or not it is successful. We need to do the work.
There are a lot of fears about Medicaid cuts. Where do you stand, and how would you handle it?
So this actually goes back to the concept of health care that I was talking about in terms of the specific example of my wife. When we look at the Affordable Care Act, and one of the reasons why our premiums in the state of Alabama went up relative to other places around the country, it had to do with the fact that we did not accept the Medicaid expansion. And the impact of that may not have been as significant in Mobile, Montgomery, Birmingham, or Huntsville, but in those rural communities that depend on that funding to continue to help support the local hospitals, it is absolutely critical. So what I would call for is to continue to fund at the levels that are appropriate to ensure that our citizens, particularly in those rural communities, have access to the health care that they need.
Okay. Let's kind of touch base on education,
Okay.
just in general. What are your thoughts on education funding and or policy about access and fairness?
Okay. So I am a product of the Mobile County Public School System, and I'm a proud graduate of John S. Shaw High School, class of 1988. I would not have been able to obtain the academic foundation that I got in order to go to the United States Naval Academy if it had not been for public education. It is absolutely critical that we fund public education. Now, I am not opposed to the concept of private schools at all if a group of citizens want to come together and figure out how to fund that school. But I am adamantly opposed to the concept of taking the limited dollars available to public school and siphoning those off to some other model. Public school is the absolute key to upward mobility. This includes traditional education, it includes special education as well. And we want to make sure that whether you are talking about somebody who is educated in the Black Belt or whether they're educated in the cities, that they have the same access to high quality education.
Shifting gears, crime in America, you know,
Okay.
running for Senate, crime, major.
Yes.
So what would you do to make our streets safer?
So in February of last year in Pritchard, Alabama, we actually had an attempted break-in. My wife called me. I was at the corner of O'Shell and University, right across the street from the University of South Alabama. She was home and someone started trying to kick in the back door. I was literally 100 miles an hour down University Boulevard trying to get there as soon as possible. And at the time, there were two thoughts that were running through my mind. The first was, am I going to have to go in there and fight somebody? And if I have to go in there and fight and someone is attempting to hurt my wife, one of the two of us isn't walking out of there alive. And the second thought that was running through my mind was, if someone comes and sees a fight in place, are they going to think that I'm the one who's trying to break into the house? So I give that specific situation because being a victim like that, we understand how it impacts families in Alabama every single day. If we're going to actually correct the crime problem on this end, we have to start at the earliest stages with programs like Head Start, with supporting our public education. And in probably the most significant thing of all is we need to provide children with the opportunity to do something after school ends and before they get back into the hands of their parents. Just a memory just popped into my head when we were driving around this past weekend, right there at the corner of St. Stephen's Road and Bear Fork Road in Pritchard, Alabama. We saw a lot of little kids, little boys and little girls, who were on the corner holding buckets. They were just trying to get $25 in order to be able to pay for the registration to become either a cheerleader or a youth football player at the park. That's the same park that I played at when I was a little boy. And so when we can focus on giving kids activities to do, when we fund Head Start and public education, then we've created an environment where they don't get distracted by a lot of things that ultimately lead to a life of crime. We believe this, all of this is interconnected.
In terms of civil rights, there's a lot of attention on a couple issues.
Yes.
Police brutality being in the forefront. How should it be addressed?
So when I talked about the situation where I had a break-in at the house in Mobile, I actually had the opportunity to talk to a black uniformed police officer in Pritchard, Alabama, which is where my home is. On a separate occasion, I actually had the opportunity to talk to a white uniformed police officer who is from the city of Mobile. When I talk to them and I ask them, what is it that you feel as though you need in this ongoing conversation that involves community and police working together, they both told me the exact same thing in the exact same order. They said they need qualified people, they need equipment that works, and they need training. They didn't talk about their pay, they didn't talk about their retirement plan, they talked about qualified people, equipment that works, and training. And guess what? When we started getting to the issue of specific police officers who are not conducting themselves appropriately, these two officers that I talked to, they want bad cops out too. Typically, whenever we start to broach this conversation, everyone is trying to set it up as an us versus them conversation. It is way beyond the time that we need to reach across the artificial lines that the establishment uses to attempt to divide us and actually come together and figure out how to make our community safer, because that benefits all the citizens of Alabama.
There's been a lot of issues and discussions dealing with the LGBTQ discriminations and trying to, eradicate them. Where do you stand, and what are your thoughts?
So I actually have two experiences that I want to share here. The first one was I got called by a reporter who asked me to provide a quote on this issue when President Trump issued a tweet about some changes that he wanted to make to the United States military. So let me tell you how I feel about this particular issue. As a person who had the privilege of serving our country in uniform, the only person on the Democratic side who ever did so, what I want in my military is a person who shares our core values. Those are the Navy core values of honor, courage, and commitment. I believe that top talent is top talent, and any young person who meets the qualifications, whether they are a sailor, a soldier, an airman, a Marine, or a Coast Guardsman, and they are willing to go into harm's way in order to protect our freedom, that is a person that I want on our team. Period, full stop, end of story.
You have 29 plus the 29 states plus the District of Columbia. They all have legalized, medical marijuana. 9 of those, including DC, also made recreational use legal. Is this good or bad, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, this goes back to the concept of do states matter? And the federal government should be involved on things that need to have a common standard across the entire country. And what I'm thinking about here are things like clean air and clean water. We all breathe the same air, we all drink the same water. So to have a federal standard that reinforces the concept that the environment is the economy is something that should go across the board. There are some issues that are related to issues of values that should continue to be studied across the board, but I do not believe that a community in New York or Chicago or Washington, D.C. should be able to tell the state of Alabama what it should do with regards to something like medical marijuana or the recreational use of marijuana. I think it's absolutely critical that we continue to study that issue as a community, but ultimately that's our community's decision as to whether or not that will be a good thing or a bad thing, not somebody out of state.
Okay. Poverty is always, it's a never-ending issue.
What is that again?
Poverty.
Okay.
So what kind of welfare reform do you think is needed? Or is it needed? Do you believe that it's needed?
So it goes back to what I was saying before about being a fiscally responsible Democrat. So any programs that we have should have a goal, they should have an evaluation criteria, and they should have a time frame through which they are evaluated. This concept should be applied to any government program, including welfare programs. What our goal is with any government program is to help the people who are really hurting today to be better positioned so that they're not hurting tomorrow. It's that work that we actually have to put in order to make the program better, because what we don't want to have happen is for a person to be in a never-ending cycle and can never get themselves out of the situation that they are in today. Our goal is to have everyone ultimately advance over time.
question. A lot of constituents continue to say they have issues reaching out to their senators or representatives once they get into office and get into play.
Yes.
So will you make yourself available and accessible to the community who actually elected you and put you into office, or those who didn't? It doesn't matter. Will you make yourself available to them? And are you going to stand on that?
Absolutely. So I've said several times throughout the course of this conversation, I'm a different kind of candidate. And most recently, I actually went to a town hall meeting in Mobile, Alabama, where the U.S. representative is Bradley Byrne, who is a Republican. And so he saw me in the audience. I raised my hand. He acknowledged me. I told him I was one of his constituents from the city of Pritchard. I told him I'm a different kind of candidate. And everybody in the room just kind of went, ooh. And what I said to him was, thank you for holding town hall meetings. He is one of the individuals on the Republican side who has had quite a number. And there are some Republicans throughout the state of Alabama who haven't had any. And so I simply wanted to compliment him on that. Now, I actually faced a wave of backlash from some people who thought I was being too polite and that I was being too nice. And what I'm saying as a different kind of candidate was that we did that in open session. Once the meeting was over and every single person had left the auditorium, then I had the opportunity to go up and talk to him privately, and I expressed to him what my views were on healthcare privately. And that actually allowed us to have an exchange in a very rational way that would have been different had I attempted to do that thing in open session. So I am absolutely committed to constituent services. I believe that is the most important thing that we do as representatives in representative government, is actually to represent constituents. And this is one area where our particular candidacy is unique compared to more establishment candidates. Because when we work as business leaders in Fortune 500 companies, and I've worked in 3, Sears, Toys R Us, and Harris Entertainment, is that our responsibility is to take care of employees so that our employees can take care of customers. And if we are not doing that, then the customers do not continue to purchase our goods and services. So in much the same way, as a United States Senator, our first responsibility is to assist constituents when it comes to interacting with the large-scale bureaucratic organization that is our federal government. And I am absolutely committed to doing that.
Well, that's it for me. Do you have any closing statements or anything that you would like to say?
Sure. 2 things. The first is that the election is on Tuesday, August the 15th. It is expected to be an extremely low turnout. This is a fantastic opportunity that all the citizens of Alabama have to participate in the process. My name is Robert Kennedy Jr. I am from Pritchard, Alabama, and I am a candidate for the United States Senate. I would absolutely love to have everyone's support on August 15th.